Okay, good morning. Everyone can hear me clearly? Hi, everyone. First session of the day, so hopefully everyone was able to get a quick walk around the booth, get a good coffee. Nice to be here. Nice to meet all of you. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Mohammed Zoni, and I'm the Senior Pre-Sales Engineer for RSA, looking after Belgium and the Benelux region and the wider EMEA. Been with RSA for around 8-9 years now, mostly focused on our identity business. And recently, RSA has gone through a lot of, let's say, internal changes, but right now we're back to focusing on what we do best, which is the identity game. And hopefully what I want as a takeaway for you from the session today is when you're leaving the room, there will be some light bulbs in your head that just lit up based on some topic we discussed or some keyword that you listened to, and hopefully this will trigger you to, when you go back home, you start searching for some additional information or some additional, let's say, input around this topic. So our topic today is assessing the risk posture within your identity journey, which is a mouthful. It's essentially a more longer way to saying what is identity risk and how does it fit in your IAM ecosystem. Right. So before we tackle this, let's start with the easiest part. What is risk? And if a lot of you already know that risk is a very subjective word. It can mean a lot of things, right? It could be something positive. I'm going to take this risk because it's a positive thing. It's going to yield some great results. I'm looking from a positive perspective. And it can be negative. I'm trying to avoid this risk. There's a risk of business loss or business impact or a fine. It could be something predictable. I know when this risk will happen. I know the percentage of it, the likelihood. Or it can be something very random. I didn't plan it ahead. It happened, now I need to react, and this is the most, let's say, undesired situation. It could be measurable. I know how much percentage of risk. I have 80% of chance to get this done. Or I have 30% chance of this event happening. Or it could be contextual. It's based on the context. I have no way to measure it. It's a high, it's medium, it's low. And what I say as a high risk is different from what you're saying as a high risk. And can be dynamic. So the risk today of this event is different from tomorrow, is different from 1 hour. It's changing according to a lot of circumstances, or it's static. It's a fixed value. Whatever happens over the next whole year, it's the same likelihood, it's the same impact, it's the same risk that will happen. Well, the good thing is that it's all of these, right? This is what I mean by risk is very subjective. It has different values, it has different definitions, a different method of approaching the risk. Now, when we take it from an identity perspective, because this is what we're focusing on today, it's identity, this is where we can look at identity risk, not just risk in general. So, okay, let's do it like this, easier. So, identity risk, it's an integral part of identity management process. And it's often ignored. Why? Because it's dynamic, it's difficult to measure, and you don't know the impact until it's too late. So a lot of organizations, when they are designing and building their identity strategy, their identity ecosystem and environment, they often forget or don't focus on the risk aspect of identity. You have an identity solution in place. You have an IAM system built in. Okay, what's the likelihood of an event not triggered by this IAM system? What's the risk from it? What's the risk of implementing this model that's not dynamic enough? There is a major change happening in organization. There's a restructuring happen. How will the system react? And then, of course, when you think about identity risk, all different types of consequences happen. Breaches, credential theft, fines, audits. It's a bigger picture, right? So to understand this picture, let's look at it from a different perspective. It touches both the technology. So when you have a security team, you have an IT team, an admin team, they're looking at IAM systems. They're looking at the processes, how to automate, how to implement the different policies. But also it touches the business side. How are we compliant? How will identity affect my business? What will happen if I'm not able to get the audits in place? So let's start first by looking some of the key or very standard identity processes that are very, let's say, product-oriented or technology-oriented. These are very easy to measure or to track, right? Time-based access, orphan accounts, rogue access. We're talking about unauthorized changes, changes made outside of the IAM scope. All of these are very static or very, let's say, traditional aspects of an identity business. You have a solution in place, there's a high chance you're tracking all of these with the proper policies, the proper workflows. But then, let's sprinkle some business-related impact. So what happens if there's a change in my process, internal change? How will my identity system adapt to it? What happens if there is like a merger? We've seen in the last year a lot of companies having acquisition. They're going through a transformation. Companies are being bought or merged. This impacts the internal processes, impacts the identities. Who is now going to report to whom? How the business will be restructured. Compliance. What happened with GDPR a couple of years ago? Now we have NIS2 on the horizon. You have DORA coming up. How will this impact my identity process, my identity approach? If we're talking about remote workforce, do I have a separate process for them? How do I manage their, let's say, identity cycle? So these are all business-related issues that need a bit of collaboration between the technology and the business stakeholders. Now, when you're trying to manage all of these at the same time, this is where the, let's say, the drops happen. This is where you end up with a lot of questions that are more difficult to answer. What will happen if I get fined? Who is on the news today? And the news for the bad news, not the good news, right? If there's an audit upcoming, if all this under my control, or am I figuring stuff out? Because make no mistake about it, when it's during an emergency, there is no time to think. This is the way of life. When we have any emergency, whether it's at work and personal life, you're reacting. You're not thinking and planning ahead. So if you don't have a plan beforehand, it becomes a problem. When you're able to answer all these questions, this is where you end up with the nightmare before identity, right? This is now, I'm stuck here. How can I get out? Either I'm completely stuck in a cycle that I'm just completely reacting to events one after the other, and I'm trying just to get ahead of the whole of the nightmare, or it swallows you up. But now, that's not all about just bad news, or it's not, the first session is not doom and gloom. Actually, risk management in general is very straightforward as a model or an approach. Usually it involves around like the 4 rings of power, which is you identify risk, you assess the risk, control it, and then assess the controls or measure the controls to see how efficient they are, and it's an endless cycle. This is for risk management in general. Now, if we took a twist on it and put the identity twist, this is where someone like the IMI, the Identity Management Institute, looks at identity risk. Same approach. You start with the identity level, the risk of the identity user, and then you go one level deeper for the accounts, the risk on the accounts, then the controls and the risk of these controls, and then you assess and review these controls. And it's the same cycle. So to start with that, the first thing we need always approach is, I'm an engineer at heart. So I always like to translate everything back to numbers. And risk is best approach when you look at it as a number, because this is very easy to quantify it. So we start by looking at each object independently first, and then set the criteria. Because with these criteria, we can now see what's important for me. If we're looking at identity or accounts, so an account that doesn't have a business description, that could be a criteria for me. An account that belongs to an orphan or terminated user, that's another criteria. An account that has not been updated or logged in for a long time. So when you have all of these different criteria, you assess what's important for your business. And now you give weight or a score or a number to each one of these criteria, and then you can sum them up and scale up. So now today, this account has a risk score of 5. Another account has a score of 20, because we're looking at different criteria, at different aspects. And we have that greater score, we can roll up. Now, the second part is context. We said risk is very subjective. So we need to have the context. And we need to have a cohort in place. Typically, we always look at risk from the highest item, and then we go down to the lowest item, right? Not necessarily the right approach. Does it make sense all the time? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So let's take an example of these two scenarios. You have a help desk team in a company, first line support, and a legal team. If I ask different people, who is like a more riskier department? A lot of people would say the legal team. They have access to NDAs, they have access to sensitive information. If they get breached, big problem for the company. But if you look at the first line support team, if someone breaches their information, they could take this data and go back to a customer and say, I'm from the support team from your vendor, just need to do a quick check or reset your password, and then just a bit of social engineering, and they're in. And this happened last year with a couple of vendors. It's not rocket science, it's very simple, but because it's very simple, it's very straightforward, again, it's often get ignored. So a lot of companies would say, I'm gonna put all of the security measures, all of the controls on the big departments, on the security departments, the network departments, the legal, and I'll forget very basic departments or easy departments because there's no impact on them. First line support, marketing, but they still have access to sensitive information. Any information can be leveraged against the company. Now, we have the score, we have the value, we have the context. We can just associate a word to it right now. If anyone familiar with this, this is a plot box. This is a statistical diagram or representation of any given set of data. Now, when we have the values, we can set the median value, we can have the maximum, the minimum, and then we have a space to move around. And as a business, you can easily say, okay, so between the minimum and the low section, this is the very low likelihood. This is the low, this is the high, this is extreme. You give them namings. But these namings now translate back to numbers. So when I say this is a high risk account in this department, I know why it's high risk. I know what does this mean. Versus when I say this is an extreme risk. It's not just we're using words that are tied to a value at the end. Because end of the day, when you have risk and context, this is the dream scenario. This is where we want to go. Because now all of the items are actionable. When I know the likelihood and I know the impact on the business, I know what to do in this case. I know what actions I need to take. We cannot measure, we cannot take action versus what you cannot measure, right? And also I can prove progress. Is my risk posture in the company, is it the same today as it was yesterday? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? Is it static? When we have values, this is where I can measure the success or the failure of my methodology. Is my current approach working, or do I need to tweak it a bit? And then I can easily justify the business impact, whether it's positive or negative. Hopefully it's the positive side. And this allows us to free risk budget for business values. So if I say that, if I figure out that there's a problem with the support team in getting their, let's say, credentials across or getting access to their systems, there's a risk that they're not doing their job on time. There's a risk associated with that. Our CEO cannot access to their system, and then this impacts the company in a sort of way. If I know that this is the high likelihood of a risk, now I can get my IT team, my technology team to start focusing on this issue and address it. And instead of working around in chaos, I'm focusing on different pillars, fixing one and moving to the other one. So if we try to widen the scope, because we're talking about risk posture in an IAM ecosystem, in a standard IAM environment, right, you have different areas where there are potential gaps or risks that are usually not very, let's say, on the top priority of a lot of organizations. So different pieces of the puzzle. We'll start with the first one, user enrollment. Often, a lot of companies want to make this very user-driven, to make it less headache on the help desk team and less time-consuming, less resource-consuming. So what's the risk of having a bad user enrollment process in place? Someone self-enroll their credentials, they're in the organization. You could have the best AI systems, the best firewall systems, but I have the accounts, I have the correct user account. Now I'm in the organization and I'm moving along. And the attackers, as soon as they penetrate the perimeter, they're able to move laterally in the organization or going up and down in the credentials. Access policies. How do you set your access policies? Are they static? And if they're static, are they easy to predict? Because I know if a company is doing the access policies based on the location, I can easily trick that by a proxy, that I'm based in Belgium, or I'm based in the Netherlands, or I'm based in France. So, and if I put a policy that is very complicated, and there is a situation that it's not accounted for, this user is locked out. So I'm saying no one works from, for example, from a foreign country. My CEO is traveling on a personal vacation and he needs to log in urgently for something out of the ordinary. Because I have a static policy in place, he's logged out. Someone has to intervene and fix this. I don't even need to speak about password management and the risks associated with passwords in general. Easily identify as the weakest chain in an authentication chain, right? User devices. A lot of organizations, they are low on budget or they are investing in somewhere else, so I cannot afford to issue corporate phones for all of my users. Use your own phone. Well, it's an unmanaged device. What's the risk associated with that? Jailbroken phone, no password on the phone, shared among friends or colleagues or even family members, and I've seen end users where both the user and his partner have access to the same phone, they have the same password. It's bad practice, but they're using it personally. Now they're asked to use it for security, for authentication. What's the risk associated with that? User engagement. Identity has a lot of user-related processes. If the processes is not put in a correct way, you cannot force the users to do reviews on time. You cannot force them to do approval on time. Yes, you can threaten, you can tell them there will be fines, there will be a lot of issues. But if you do that in a negative way, a very common scenario, if I'm a manager and I have a headache from the security team to do the review on time, yeah, I'll go to the review, open the review, select all, approve all. I'm done. Because now I'm just worried about the SLA, I'm not worried about the impact or the risk of these actions. Infrastructure. If I have a full cloud environment, what will happen, not if, when the cloud goes down. This is a given fact. There is no vendor, even including us, anyone that can say I have 100% availability for our cloud infrastructure. It's bound to happen. What happens when it goes down? We have seen in some instances, some vendors, when their let's say, authentication software goes down, they have a fail open. They revert back to passwords. Good practice, bad practice? I can say it's bad practice based on what happened in the news around a year and a half ago. Risk modeling. How do we define risk? Does all the departments look at the risk at the same way? Some departments say, my orphan accounts, this is the highest risk item I have. Other departments, business focused, I need business descriptions. If an account doesn't have a description, user doesn't know what to do with it. Manager doesn't know what to do with it. They cannot review it. They cannot correct it. So it's the complex and dynamic risk modeling. And finally, compliance. Regulations are issued all the time with fines upcoming, with different, let's say, requirements, different actions you need to go through. In the audience, how many of you are in the financial sector or financial department? Okay, so that's good. If someone is working in the financial department, chances are DORA is on your radar. Being applied next year in the EU, and potentially now there will be room of fines. GDPR, when it first issued, a lot of organizations, okay, I'll look at it when it's due time. And then suddenly, now you need to be GDPR compliant. If you're not, fines, damage reputation, lawsuits. So these are all, again, these are not all the piece of the puzzle. If we widen the scale, it becomes a lot more. So let's start focusing on these and then quickly align on how RSA sees these areas, each one of them. So for the user enrollment, and this is the RSA approach, why not have secure enrollment? And secure enrollment, I'm not only talking about a code that is sent on an email or SMS to use it when you're logging in for the first time to enroll. We're talking about the user that just joined the company, they don't have an authenticator in place, and they want to log in and enroll. So instead of having them come to the office and show their ID, why not, well, they're working from home or remote, just scan your passport, scan your driver license, scan your national ID, and then I can compare this. I can see the validity of the document, the data on it. Does it match the user information or not? There's a watermark, there's any information on it. As soon as I verify this, I can say, okay, you're secure enough, let's continue for the enrollment. Access policies. If they're static, they can be predicted. An attacker can try to trick the system. Why not use risk AI? User behavior analysis. What's my behavior over the last year? And is my current behavior deviating for that or not? Am I logging in from the same browser, from the same laptop, from the same country, during the same time of hours, accessing the same applications in the same order or not? Am I clicking too many clicks on the screen? Am I typing the password or the user ID too fast for a human entry? All of these are parameters that an engine would track, and it becomes very difficult for an attacker to try to mimic. Of course, password transition to passwordless, using QR codes, for example, passkeys, whether we're talking about physical passkeys like ubicos, or we're talking about digital passkeys, and we're talking about application-bound passkeys. If anyone's writing on FIDO recently, so they rebranded the whole naming of FIDO into passkeys, and there are 3 types of passkeys. There is the physical passkey on your physical key. There is the application bound, which is bound to the application on your phone. And there's the account bound passkey, which is the most convenient but the worst security. This was originally developed by Google, Apple, and Microsoft, and it's meant for the consumers, not for employees. Essentially, when I link my passkey to my Apple ID, it's synchronized across all my Apple devices. My iPads, my iPhones, my MacBooks. I cannot track how many devices are synced. I cannot control it, I cannot limit it. So if I have an old phone that I left around, someone took it, they see my passkey, they can now use it, right? User devices, introducing something like mobile lock, where it's a built-in OEM solution for mobile threat defense. Basically, I'm analyzing the status of the user's phone without looking at the user data. I'm not interested in the user ID or the user name or their phone number. I'm just interested in the phone. Is it safe to use for authentication or not? Does it have a malicious software or not? Is it jailbroken or not? Is it rooted or not? If any of these stuff are detected, I can lock the authentication app on the phone. You can still use your personal phone for calls, for social media, for everything, but I'm saying it's not secure enough right now to use for authentication. And then you have to work with your IT to resolve this issue, and the app gets unlocked immediately. User engagement. We introduce a gamification concept, basically a built-in points and reward mechanism, where instead of trying to always threaten the employees, you have to do this or this or this, or you'll get fined, you'll get a warning, you'll get a bad phone call from your manager. If you do these actions, you get points, you get badges, you earn rewards. And then you can see among your colleagues, where do you stand? Are you hitting your numbers? Are you doing reviews on time? Are you doing approvals on time? You're leaving comments or not? Are you having everything that you get is approved? Everything is rejected. All of these are badges. Then I can make it a healthy competition, and the person who is doing the most positive impact in the department gets reward, gets an extra day off, gets a voucher, whatever. But now you are making it more of a healthy competition. Infrastructure. Not only clouds, not only on-premise, hybrid. And an actual true connected hybrid, not just a component that talks to the cloud and a component that talks on-prem, but everything is interconnected. You're using the same authenticator to access both systems. If the cloud goes down, I fail over to the on-premise part. So it's not a fail open, it's a fail closed. So I have a phone that has the OTP on it. I use it for QR codes, for biometrics, for push to approve. Cloud goes down, I switch back to OTP. Immediately on the spot, without admin intervention, without any intervention from the end user. Risk modeling, having your own built-in identity risk engine, where you can fine-tune the parameters. You can assess on each object what's important for you as a business. Requests that are pending approval, bigger weight than requests that are pending approval but has violation, even a higher weight. Orphan accounts that are dormant, not been used for a long time. So you can tune the engine to your perspective, to your different departments and processes, and this ties back to the first topic, that it's subjective. The risk is subjective, so I need to be able to tune it to my desire. And finally, for the compliance, dynamic dashboards and analytics. Analytics is key aspect of having a proper IAM methodology in your environment. So these are all different aspects that RCA is providing as part of our identity portfolio. Do you need to have all of them? Not necessarily. On the first phase, definitely not, because the identity is always a journey. It's not a destination. It's always you're always trying to adapt and build and adjust your model. This year, gamification not very important. I don't care about the user encouragement. I don't care about their engagement. Next year, This is essential for me because I built the infrastructure. Now I need to get my business stakeholders more involved. I have the processes in place, I have the dashboards in place, I have the authentication mechanism in place. So I'm gonna focus just very quickly on the last two components, the risk engine and the advanced dashboard. These are part of our RSA governance and lifecycle solution, which is our IGA aspect of the RSA offering. Essentially, what we built here is we built our own built-in risk model, which is divided into three pillars or three aspects. You have the risk topics, which are intrinsic, proactive, or reactive. And then we have the subtopics for each of these topics. And then the item that consists of, that build each subtopic. So the reason we have them segmented into three pillars or three topics, reactive is related to reviews when you are reacting to a user access. Proactive is based on policies, whether you're talking about violations, exceptional access, or open access. And then intrinsic is standalone topics. Collection that has been happened for a long time, dormant accounts, orphan accounts, no description, past approvals, all of these aspects. And then we start to add different structure. So you have the risk engine itself with all the queries that you can use as they are, or you can adjust them to your liking. On top of that, you put the structure. So you say, what are the three structures that we have? Which one are essential for you? Which one we want to skip? And then the admin part comes in where you tune all of these weights. I'm going to give this a score of 50. I'm going to give this topic a score of 30. This one gets 10. And after you tune the engine, now it's about representing this data in a dynamic dashboards, dynamic reporting, real-time ad hoc dashboards, not statistical data, where you can drill down, you can click on them, you can move away from one department to the other, because the goal here was using these dynamic dashboards is we want to make it easier to have decision. As we said, in emergency, there's no time to think. People just take decisions, they take action. So we want to make the decision process very quick and very efficient. So presenting the right visual data to the right audience, whether it's the requester, it's the auditor, it's the approvers. And we are reducing what we call hunting for information. So you're not clicking around. You're looking for where the information is. You're also having more audit readiness because you have the right data in front of you. And it's all in the same platform. You're not relying on different tools like you're having between searching and exporting between different reports. Everything is connected and everything is in one holistic environment. And of course, follow-up would be the end user satisfaction. It's all about the digital experience. If I have a very robust solution and it's a nightmare to use or requires someone that has a coding experience, not going to be used. Or you have an army of developers that are working to get this to use. And identity management is best handled by the business stakeholders. A manager knows what type of access an employee should have, not the IT admin. The IT admin knows if this is a correct access or not, but the manager knows if this is useful for the department or not. So in summary, the main takeaways I would like for you to have from this session is that analytics and visibility are key. And if you take a look at the last Gartner Leader's Guide for IGA, you can see here that this is the IGA core functions as defined by Gartner, and analytics sits in the middle. It's the main hub connecting all of the standard IAM pillars. The lifecycle, the automation, the audit, all of these have to be connected by the proper analytics and the proper visibility. And also another diagram that they shared. This is the, let's say, the bigger scope of IAM, and you can see that it was defined into 4 pillars: admin, authorization, analytics, and assurance. And an IGA solution always touches on the analytics part, and the analytics is the one that is connecting between all of them. So a powerful IGA tool is key, but a powerful IGA tool with a robust analytics engine. This is the essential part. And a proper identity risk management has a lot of values. Key ones are, when you combine it with analytics, it's an integral part of a zero trust model. You can't have a zero trust model without a proper risk management, identity risk management process in play. If you look at the recent Gartner Security Risk Management Summit that took place this year, they're predicting by 2026, 30% of enterprises will consider something like biometrics and Face ID not as relevant because of AI and deepfakes. So they are not relevant on their own. This is the key word here. Unreliable in isolation. So if they're used on their own, unreliable. But when you combine them with risk management, with the risk of this account, with the risk of the device being used, the risk of the user identity, now you have a bigger picture. You are painting a wider picture. It helps you identify potential areas of attacks and consequently where to invest your resources. Do I need to invest in device management? Do I need to have a proper endpoint solution in place? Do I need to have a proper next-gen firewall? Where to invest my resources and where to invest my time? And the final and the most difficult question to answer, not what's the cost if I get breached, it's most of what is the cost when I get breached. All the vendors and all of the rooms that you'll see here have had the breach at one point or the other. Similar for organization. Breach is coming at some point. This is not a scare tactic. You just need to prepare for it and make sure that when it happens, how you'll react. When you're able to answer this question, this is where you can transition from a potential security breach and transition into your security reach, expanding your security reach, touching all the different moving parts within your organization. That's it for today. Thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, please pass by our booth at the Arrow stand. There's a big Arrow booth at the middle. Happy to have any open discussion or any of the topics you listened today. We can show it in a live demo and just have an open discussion about what does identity and risk mean for you. Okay, thank you.